So somebody's just said, what about the good value of sci-fi? And I've decided, no, I'm not going to have the good value either. I've decided just to take out higher, the importance of sci-fi. Yeah, defends the importance of sci-fi. Then that's okay. Yeah, it defends the importance of sci-fi or the significance maybe of sci-fi, but higher importance. That was what was bothering me. I don't think we say higher importance, so I'm going to save that. We just say the importance of sci-fi, and then we've done that one. So now we're going to share a different document. Hold on. It's an essay on homeschooling. Okay, let's try and make sure this is all nice and clear. Okay, hopefully you can all see that nice and clearly. Let's put it like that. Okay, I hope that everything is clear for you all. Let's get cracking. So homeschooling, and I think this essay is really interesting. It's good. It's a good essay, and definitely this guy's essays are getting better. I'm very pleased to see it. Homeschooling, the content of this essay, I agree with for the most part as well. So let's have a look. Homeschooling is many times, was what the student said, yeah, many times seen as a controversial trend. I'm not sure many times works so well with seen as a controversial trend. I can't imagine ever saying I have many times seen this as a controversial trend. I can imagine myself saying I have often seen this, or I have frequently seen this, or I have for the most part seen this as a controversial trend. And that's why I recommend not using many times here. And I think it's because really to see something as a controversial trend is really to have an opinion of something. And then you're describing a state. And you can't really many times have an opinion of something. You can't really many times describe a state as happening many times, yeah? And so for this reason, I don't think we'd say it. I don't think we put many times with seen as a controversial trend. I think you can say, I have seen my friend many times today. Sure, yeah, I have seen this film many times, because then they are countable events. But this doesn't seem like a countable event to me to have an opinion that this is controversial. And so I think often, frequently, or for the most part, work much better. Now, despite that, now, a few things I want to say here. Number one, don't use that to refer to something that has just been mentioned. Use this. Despite this would be a step in the right direction, but I still don't like it. But don't use that. That's the first point here. Yeah, don't use that. And I think you might do it down at the bottom here. Do you do it down at the bottom? Yes, you do. Look, that trend. This trend, you've just mentioned it. Yeah, if you've just mentioned something in the sentence before, use the pronoun this to refer to it. Don't use the pronoun that. So that's one reason why I really want to point that out, because this student has done this before and I don't want him to keep doing it. I want him to stop. I don't want him to do it ever again. Okay. And now what about despite this? Well, despite this still sounds a bit odd to me, or let's say it doesn't look grammatically incorrect at all. But I don't think we often say it. I think we usually say in spite of this, or in spite of all this. So I think you can do it with in spite of, but I don't think it sounds very natural with despite. Despite this doesn't sound very natural to me, although it's grammatically correct. So I don't want to say that that's wrong, but despite that's definitely wrong. Now, here, you could just say nevertheless. Yeah, you could just use an adverb like that rather than a prepositional phrase and just say nevertheless. This kind of educational model is on the rise in several countries worldwide. Now, it sounded strange to me to say on the steady rise. I understand you mean rising steadily, yeah? But on the rise kind of means rising steadily anyway. I mean, it doesn't have that in there, but I was thinking at first of changing this to is on a steady rise, but on the rise, I think is more common, and it's probably what we would say. Yeah, this kind of educational model is on the rise, meaning increasing generally in several countries worldwide. As a result, many nations have already set. Yeah, remember that this is one of your present perfect signal words, and so it's a signal. You've got to use present perfect here. Many nations have already set regulatory rules and laws on this subject. In response to this phenomena, some experts praise the idea, while others heavily condemn this option. You're using this nice Some think X, others think Y. And look, you've got the while in there this time. That's excellent. And that's why it sounds great. The only problem is praise is not prize. Yeah, prize is something you win. It's a noun. Praise is I'm sure this is the word you wanted to use because it's the opposite of condemn. So it sounds great. Good. That's a strong introduction. And although you can see a lot of red there aren't actually that many mistakes. You know, that one's a spelling mistake, and I can forgive spelling mistakes. I find spelling very difficult. That one, well, that's less forgivable. I go on about that a lot. But this one as well, yeah, don't use that for something just mentioned. And yeah, I think that's pretty forgivable as well. But just for your information, that sounds a little bit better. So one aspect some educators point out against homeschooling, I felt that it needed commas. And it's just because you don't point out against. Yeah, and it's quite easy to read it like that if we don't have the commas in there. We could put it earlier. We could say one aspect against homeschooling that some educators point out. Yeah, something like that. But you don't have to. You can put it here and then just use commas if you do. So they point out against homeschooling is the assumption of less meaningful, I think significant, isn't quite as common here, of less meaningful socialization with peers. And then that sounds really good. And I totally understand what you mean. Yeah, it's people assume that with homeschooling, the kids will socialize, you know, or have meaningful socialization far less often. This lack of interaction, not exposition. An exposition is an explanation usually of something. It's something very different. And so we need this lack of interaction, or this lack of, what else could we say, communication maybe, could have deleterious cognitive effects in developing the critical skills that these children will certainly need later in their lives. Okay, so interaction sounds better and meaningful sounds better, but in developing, so this could have negative effects, yeah, deleterious effects. It's not a word that I use very often, if I'm honest, but it's a good word. Why not? Deleterious cognitive effects in developing the critical skills that these children will certainly need. So we're defining in developing critical skills. I think we are telling the listener which skills, the skills that these children will certainly need later in their lives. So we're being really specific. So the sounds good. And I would put in the relative pronoun. Yeah, the critical skills, these children. I know you can drop them, but quite often it's good putting them in an academic essay. It's sometimes just much easier to read. There's no danger in misunderstanding. It just makes it really clear that this is a relative clause describing the critical skills, yeah, that these children will certainly need later in their lives. Now, certainly, let me be clear. Maybe I muddled some people up last time. Wouldn't be the first time. So last time I said that certainly, definitely, probably, and possibly go before negative adverbials, okay, before negative modal verbs. All mid-position adverbs go between the main two verbs, and that's where I've put this certainly. Yeah, if we look at this verb chain, will, need, put it between the two verbs. Will certainly need, will probably need, will definitely need, will possibly need. The only time when you put, and it's only those four words, although there are probably some other ones, but they're all about probability. Put these probability adverbs before any negative modal verb. Won't, can't, couldn't, shouldn't, mustn't. Put them before negative modal verbs or before negative auxiliary verbs. Yeah, so they probably haven't got married or something like that. They certainly haven't got married. They definitely haven't got married. Put these guys before negative auxiliaries and negative modals. But they go in the middle, the same position as all the other adverbs when it's not negative, when it's positive. So will certainly need, it's got to be there, and it can't be certainly will need. Okay, so it's another adverb position mistake. Oh, whoops, wrong one. Sorry. Have you got the right one up there, the homeschooling one? Yeah. Okay. Okay. For instance, these students could not adequately acquire the abilities needed for teamwork. These deficits would have adverse effects on their employment opportunities. Good. That sounded good. Another element that those opposing homeschooling mention is the potential risk of misanthropy. Now, I changed this because the first way it was put is a supposed risk of misanthropic potential. And that sounded really unnatural to me. The supposed risk of misanthropic potential. What is misanthropic potential? I mean, I think you mean the potential to become misanthropic. So I've put is the potential risk of misanthropy. Due to being submitted to stricter religious or philosophical standards, good, these students could form a more intransigent opinion. This inclination means these students would be more likely, and not more probability, more likely, would be more likely to become adults with not minor tolerance, little tolerance, they say, not much tolerance, with not enough tolerance, with little tolerance to ethnic and cultural diversity. Very good. These are all buzzwords in any essay that you're writing for an exam board, and so I think this is good. Consequently, some voices fear. Now, I didn't like that. I've put brackets around voices because I want you to say something like, some voices argue, because a voice can argue, but a voice can't fear. I mean, a voice can't fear. A person can fear, but a voice can't fear. So I would say some fear these children, and that's fine. Consequently, some fear these children would have a higher probability, blah, 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 blah. Or some voices argue that these children, something like that. So one or the other, but some fear sounds fine. Some fear these children would have a higher probability of becoming future disruptive members of society. Good paragraph again. It's good. A third concern about homeschooling is if you had been, I'm talking to the student here, the Brazilian student, if you had been thinking about going on a course in a British university, I might not have made this correction. But I know that you're going on a course in an American university. And for that reason, I want you to be aware that they prefer whether to if the word is not a conditional. This is not conditional if. This is not if the students achieve the same results, then they will blah, blah, blah. This is not that kind of if. This is the kind of if that you use in sentences like, I don't know if I will come to the party. When you think about it, I don't know if I will come to the party. That if is not a conditional if. It's a different kind of if. It's a different meaning. It means the same as whether here. I don't know whether I will come to the party. And what you'll notice is that any first or second conditional sentence, you can't change the if to a whether. You can't say, whether I win £1 million, I would buy, whether I won £1 million, I can't even say, I would buy a yacht. You can't do it. It's awful. It's not right. So be aware that there are two different kinds of ifs in English. There's an if which is conditional, and there's also an if which means whether. There are other types of if as well, and so it's complicated, but well worth bearing in mind. So if you're writing something for an American university, be aware that the Americans do prefer whether to if you're not using a conditional. So I'm pretty sure they would change this to whether. So I have to, just because I understand it's for an American uni. Okay, is whether students will achieve the same results as those in regular schools, despite eventual intermittent tests and regulatory supervision. Does sound a bit weird to say eventual and intermittent at the same time, so it might be worth getting rid of eventual. Something only happens eventually if it's after a long time, and intermittent, it just means random, or regular and random kind of thing. Anyway, I do like the way you've used despite. Despite is a preposition, which means you need a noun phrase after it, which is what you've got. So homeschooling students could still could experience some deficits. You notice that I automatically just said could still experience. Why did I do that? Because it's an adverb, and these adverbs normally go in the mid position there. You might hear people put it there sometimes, but let's just say that the mid position between the first modal verb and the next verb, because could experience is the verb chain, that's the safest place to put it. If you want to play it safe with your adverbs, put them between the modal verb and the main verb. The first verb and the second verb, let's say, because that's clearer. Put them between the first and second verbs always. Regular schools, especially public ones. Now, again, if you were writing to an British university, I would have changed this. But you're writing to an American one, so it's correct, because they do say public schools. We only say public school when we mean the most expensive schools in the country, like Eton and Harrow. They're public schools. So I would never say public school in the UK to mean state school. In the UK, we say state schools or comprehensives for the regular schools that are available for ordinary people. So regular schools, especially public ones, have their disposable government funds, governmental funds, have their disposable government funds. I feel like it should be government funds and resources to strengthen didactic programs. Besides, this institution employs qualified teachers and applies a more solid curriculum. Good, but which institution do you mean? That's all. The only thing have you mentioned a institution? Here you've mentioned regular schools, and here you've mentioned public schools. Is that what you mean by this institution? Because it does sound strange to say regular schools, this institution, maybe these institutions, would be better. Just because then it matches to the plural noun, regular schools, or the plural noun here, public schools. So that's something that's worth thinking about. You should probably say either say a regular school here, especially a public school, has, and then this will sound normal, besides this institution. Okay, so just make it clear when you're referring to things, that be careful with singular and plural, basically. Besides, these institutions employ qualified teachers and apply, you have to make all these other corrections, a more solid curriculum. On the other hand, the defenders of homeschooling argue that having their studies at home does not imply social exclusion. We don't really say reclusion. I mean, we talk about a recluse, but I don't think there is a word reclusion. Is there? It came up with an underlining on my word program, and I thought it's got to be exclusion, surely. I haven't heard social reclusion, but I could be wrong. So if anyone wants to get a dictionary out and prove me wrong, please do. So hi, Karina, and hi, Mohammed. Let's keep going. In most cases, there are opportunities to engage in local community life and family activities. Excellent. I like that. There are more opportunities to engage in local community life and family activities. So local community life and family activities. This configuration could represent a higher level of freedom to establish healthy relationships, including with peers. You have a relationship with somebody, including with peers of the same age. As a result, social abilities develop, although in a safer and healthier environment than usually at public schools. Yeah, it's often the case. Personally, I like the idea of kids going off to school just because I think that children have to be introduced to the real world at an early stage. And what I mean is a world where they don't get help from their parents all the time and where they don't get help from adults all the time, but a world where they're among their peers and where they learn about the world without that kind of I think sometimes parents can be overbearing and can force their own ideas onto kids. And so it's good to get the kids out of that at home sometimes. So moreover, as the news makes abundantly clear, yet this is an adjective collocation, just like those adverb collocations we've been looking at recently. And it sounds lovely, doesn't it? Abundantly clear. Let me make myself abundantly clear. So as the news makes abundantly clear and not makes a plain fact. Makes plain is okay, but not makes a plain fact. So abundantly clear, regular schools are not places where diversity and tolerance maybe thrives. Yeah, it's up to you whether you include that. But I didn't like what diversity acceptance, where diversity and tolerance or where the acceptance of diversity, you might get away with that, the acceptance of diversity. I think that's what you meant, but we wouldn't say diversity acceptance. Modern society substantiates this truth, and then I've changed this part because I didn't really understand it. It didn't sound very natural. So I changed it to modern society substantiates this truth, it primarily being the result of the dominant schooling techniques. Because I think this was what you were trying to say. You were trying to say that society is primarily the result of schooling. Yeah, so the school is a microcosm of society. And if society looks one way, it's because the school systems already operate in that way. Okay, one additional aspect that must be highlighted is how homeschooling can be more effective than state education. You might want to put that in just to make it clear, and not just more effective than it is now, yeah, because it's not clear exactly what you mean without that clarification. This kind of teaching is regulated by individual progress. Thus, it deals with specific difficulties and molds itself upon all demands, allowing students to develop faster and consistently. That's good. I like that sentence. Is that all parallel with specific difficulties? So it deals, blah, 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 and molds, blah, 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 allowing students to develop faster and consistently. Good. Maybe faster and more consistently, actually. Maybe faster and more consistently, just because I feel like consistently is an adverb. To develop faster. Faster is actually adverbially here. It's describing to develop faster, but and more consistently. I feel as though it just sounds like then you've got two comparatives there. To develop, I don't want to say more fast and more consistent, but faster and more consistently. Besides, the learner is more of a participant in educational decisions. This inclusiveness, good. I like the this, you're right, because you just mentioned it. This inclusiveness contributes to improving the student's maturity. Yeah, because you've got one student here, so it's got to be the students, because of the apostrophe. I've got to do this, otherwise, if it's just a plural, then okay, improving students' maturity and commitment. Good. One documented effect of this is that some universities prefer these students nowadays. To sum up, homeschooling is becoming more common, not more usual, more common than in the past. In response to this, the one I've just mentioned, this trend, the questions related to the homeschooling model should be thoroughly discussed in the interest of children and the whole society. Good conclusion. Okay, so any questions at all about any of the mistakes that I've corrected there? Any questions about why exactly I've made a certain correction? Just let me know. Just write it down here. I'm just trying to, okay, that's how I make people's comments come up. Oh, wow, I'm learning today. You learn something new every day, don't you? So that's how I make your comments come up. That's interesting. So let's look at some questions then. Karina says, what is a buzzword? Yeah, what's a buzzword, guys? Who wants to tell Karina what a buzzword is? Anybody got any ideas? Okay, I've gone over 20 minutes now. This is going to give me a nightmare. This is going to give me a nightmare for uploading it onto my channel. So I'm going to stop it right now, guys. I'm sorry. But, okay, other words, yeah, I'm afraid if you want definition of buzzword or involved, the good news is they're both in the dictionary. So I'll see you all very soon, maybe at the weekend, maybe next week, but I'll be making a lot more of these classes. So please do come if they're interesting for you. And please do continue to use dictionaries if you're not sure of the definitions of words.